On this episode of the Challenge All-Stars, Homer votes for Kodos, Flanders knows what you did last summer, and Lisa grows a civilization out of her tooth. I'm Lizzie Frizzle. Welcome to the Recap Corner. Today, we're talking about Season 3, Episode 3 of the Challenge All-Stars. It's titled Treehouse of Horror, named in honor of a new alliance called Treehouse that plays a huge role in the episode. At first, I thought the of horror part was going to refer to whatever havoc the alliance wreaked on the game. Unfortunately, the horror turned out to be a series of unpredictable personal tragedies that forced 2 players to leave the show. Even if the second half of the episode was really sad, the first half was pretty great. We saw a lot of strategizing. We started to gain an understanding of where everyone's loyalties lie and who everyone's wary of. But the biggest development is the formation of Treehouse. I'm not sure how they came to call themselves Treehouse. Obviously, saying their name evokes the idea of a treehouse, which I like because treehouses are a fun thing to think about, even though I haven't been in one in over a decade probably. But if the opportunity presented itself later today to climb into a treehouse, I would not say no. It's a room-based alliance, the members being Kayla, Sylvia, Jemmy, Tina, Veronica, Ronnie, and Derek. So it's 6 women plus Derek, even though he does have a confessional this episode where he talks about sharing a room with 7 women, which makes me wonder if he just misspoke because it's a 7-person alliance, so it's an easy mix-up. Or is there actually a 7th woman staying in that room who's not part of Treehouse? And if so, who is it? And I would love to know why they're not in the alliance. Joining Treehouse is a really fun, fresh storyline for Derek. I can't remember him ever having an alliance like this in any other challenge appearance. And aside from the narrative, they've got the potential to be a pretty dominating group. At the beginning of this episode, there are 20 people left in the game. Of those 20, 7 are Treehouse members, and of the 7 Treehouse members, 4 have been in the authority in 2 of 3 challenges. Competitive abilities aside, I think a lot of Treehouse members are also really benefiting politically. Usually with a big alliance like this, I feel like there's a few people that really benefit and everyone else is just kind of standing in a predetermined order waiting to go into elimination. But that doesn't seem to be the case with Treehouse, at least not yet. I think Derek is benefiting the most of anyone, and if enough of them stick around late into the season, I think he'll only continue to benefit more and more. I also see Treehouse as really helpful for Kayla and Sylvia, who might be seen as easy targets for old school players. And I also think Ronnie is really benefiting from a big alliance, specifically because she came into the game with what seems like the least amount of pre-existing social connections. We learned that the Treehouse's main targets, really only targets, seemingly, are Kendall and Kellyanne. They think they're strong competitors, they're a tight twosome, and they don't want to go against them. I did think their choice to target Kendall was interesting only because last season, when Nehemiah's half of the house was targeting Derek, Kendall was cited as one of the women who would definitely not vote against Derek. But now Derek's alliance is pretty aggressively targeting Kendall. In other alliance news, MJ tries to convince Jonna to softly align with Wes, but so far it doesn't seem to be working. Though I would not hate that. Jonna is like the best player on All Stars, and Wes is one of the best players on the flagship show, so let's put them together. We also get what I'm choosing to interpret as 2 more pieces of evidence that Wes and Jordan are secretly working together. The first of which comes during the challenge. It's called Playing Dirty. Contestants race through a mud pit to retrieve a ball, then carry it back to the other end of the pit. There are always less balls than people, so whoever doesn't get one is eliminated. The first man and woman eliminated go straight into the arena, and the final 3 men and women left form the authority. Mud pit challenges are a franchise institution. Different iterations regularly pop up, all tied together by good old-fashioned mud wrestling. Playing Dirty is a pretty no-frills, uncomplicated version. Like last week, it makes the challenge feel like an All-Stars challenge, and I really enjoyed watching it. Unlike last episode, the new sabotage is way harsh and definitely affects the outcome of the challenge, which is the kind of impact I was hoping the sabotages were going to have. This time, sabotaged contestants have to wear a 35-pound weight vest while they go traipsing through the mud in the middle of a race. Even better, the new sabotage gives us lots of new content in the genre of Yes-Wes rivalry. First, there's a really funny exchange where Yes tries to convince Wes or maybe trick him into just volunteering to take Yes's sabotage.
You're the only one that's been burdened with the art of sabotage. I think you're pretty good at it. I don't like it. I don't want to deal with it. I want to give it away. Do you want it?
No. When you say do I want it, as in do I want to receive it, or do you want me to be able to present it?
That's what I mean. Do you? Sorry.
Oh, now you're really learning how to manipulate the old ginger here.
No,
I see what you're doing.
That's what I mean.
Oh.
Then later, at the actual challenge, Yes does sabotage Wes, which makes sense. I mean, who else was he going to choose? But the reason he gives is that he wants to return the sabotage to the saboteur, as if Wes invented the concept and pitched it to producers.
I figure since I don't even want nothing to do with it, I might as well just put it back where it first came from and give it back to the saboteur himself, Wes.
I think that is such a ridiculous reason to give, which is why I loved it so much. It was my favorite speech anybody gave in the episode. After Yes dispatches his sabotage, it's Kendall's turn to play hers. She asks TJ if she can play it on either a male competitor or herself. TJ says yes to both, but also criticizes her for considering playing it on herself, as he should. That would be a wild thing to do. Instead, what Kendall does is somehow even wilder. Seeing that she is struggling to make a decision, Jordan volunteers to eat the sabotage. He volunteers to take the weight vest. But for some reason, Kendall gives it to MJ. We've seen Kendall almost panic like this when it's time to make a quick decision before. In All Stars 1, during the trivia challenge, instead of dropping into the water like everyone else, she walked back across the platform and drew the ire of the rest of the cast for the entire season. I have a feeling throwing her sabotage on MJ is going to do even more damage to her game. It especially doesn't make sense because we learned this episode that Jonna, MJ's closest ally, is one of Kendall's only friends in the house. After the sabotages have been handed out, the women compete first. Veronica places last after getting dragged by Kendall through almost the entire mud pit. Veronica is trying to wrestle a ball away from Kendall, and she just doesn't get it done. But it's a valiant effort on both of their parts. Kendall for being so strong she doesn't get her ball stolen, and Veronica for having the bravery to keep trying. In the final round, Kayla wins, Janae places second, and Sylvia comes in third. It's an impressive performance by the Treehouse Alliance because they really effectively use teamwork to ensure that the majority of women winners are from their group. But it's an even more impressive display from Janae, who, playing as an individual, comes in second in a game designed to be tackled cooperatively. The last thing from the women's heat worth noting, and it is an ominous note at that, is Tina needing to pop her knuckle back in after a particularly brutal round of play. Second, the men compete. MJ comes in last, saddled by both the 35-pound sabotage and a knee injury I think he incurred last season. In their final round, Brad wins, Derek places second. He is really fast at running through the mud. And Jordan comes in third. All three of them perform really impressively, and all three also seem relatively unbothered by their fellow competitors, which may indicate good political standing. The first evidence of a potential West-Jordan alliance comes during the men's heat. In the first round, as Jordan is about to finish, you can see him drop a second ball into the mud right next to where Wes happens to be. Wes then gets the ball and finishes the round because of it. There's also a great moment between Yes and Nehemiah. As they're wrestling in the mud, Yes does some move that Nehemiah deems dirty, which happens every time there's a mud pit challenge. There's always at least one person who accuses at least one other person of dirty play. So this time it's Nehemiah accusing Yes, and Yes's response is just in that calm, even-toned, soothing voice that Yes always has. He just goes, "Never wrestled before?" I love it.
You wrestle me again without a ball, I'm beating your ass. You'll be all right. Yeah, I will. So are you when I beat your ass. Never wrestled before? Well, Mr. Integrity.
Yes is really making me laugh this season. I'm really enjoying Yes. So we've got our authority for the episode, Kayla and Brad as the overall winners, and they're joined by Janae, Sylvia, Derek, and Jordan. I didn't notice this until I rewatched the episode. Except for Derek, all of those people are making their second appearance in the authority in only 3 episodes. So I'm just like really impressed with all of them. As the cast is about to head back to the mansion, TJ reminds them that the game is always on. I really hooked into that, and I spent the rest of the episode expecting some kind of wacky night challenge to take place, but nothing happened. Maybe next time, or maybe I just focus on the wrong things. After the challenge, the cast dresses up in some of the most elaborate costumes I've ever seen on this show and throws a 70s party. During 2 storylines or themes start to emerge that I think have the potential to be important for the rest of the season. The first is about changing roles. Just because you fit into one archetype during your original appearances doesn't mean that you're still playing that type now in All Stars. And mostly, I'm talking about Janae. Janae's meteoric rise has been one of the most exciting parts of All Stars thus far. And now, this season, there's a whole new element where players like Wes and Jordan, people who played alongside her during their earlier challenge appearances, have to adapt to this new era of Janae. At the beginning of the episode, Janae describes her younger self as not a very good player. Personally, I thought Janae was an above-average competitor. You know, she wasn't like Laurel, but she wasn't Siobhan either. And I always thought it was a combination of editing and unsupportive partners that kind of held her back. Regardless, she was not a challenge heavy hitter. But now, she's like the heavy hitter. She's definitely the best woman in the game, and she's one of the most well-rounded competitors of anyone. This is not the same Janae it used to be, and it's been really fun to watch people discover that every season. I think there's a similar thing, but to a way lesser extent, going on with Kayla, where, at least for me, I'm seeing her as this big-time strategy player for probably the first time. The other storyline has been brewing since the season premiere. Old schoolers versus new schoolers. Throughout the episode, we hear from a few different early era competitors, people like Yes, Darrell, and Kendall, about wanting to keep the game fair, or not wanting to politic or engage in too much strategizing. Whereas the new school players, people like Kayla and Sylvia, are always down to scheme. Wes, too, of course, he invented it. Unfortunately, the biggest effect the old school versus new school storyline has on this episode is that it makes Kendall look even worse than she did after sabotaging MJ. She equates being an old school player with sacrificing more in order to appear, namely time with her husband and children. It cannot be a coincidence that this episode includes both footage of Kendall claiming that the younger contestants don't have children to miss and a confessional of Sylvia talking about missing her stepson. Kendall also equates playing fair with not sending her into the arena and waiting to beat her in the final instead. Which seems like quite the coincidence, Kendall. The only way the game is fair is if you go to the final. That just doesn't make sense. I know that nobody wants to go to the arena, so you say whatever you can think to say to maybe get out of it. But that is truly one of the worst arguments I can remember hearing on the challenge in a long time. And I also don't subscribe to the idea of needing to keep the best around until the end in order to beat them properly. If you send the best home in week 2, you still beat them. The morning after the 70s party, the tone of the episode drastically shifts. Out of nowhere, we learn that Tina didn't actually pop her knuckles back in during the challenge. She broke her hand, and obviously, as a result, has to leave the game. We can't all be Cara Maria. We never hear what happens to Tina's 3 stars, so I assume they just float them up into the night sky and they join up with some constellation that could use a little filling out. I was really, really sad to see Tina go. I was happy for all the screen time she got in the first 2 episodes, if this was going to be it. She just has this made-for reality TV quality that is kind of hard to come by. She is one of the best confessionalists in the business, and I'll never get bored of watching her. Unfortunately, the bad news only gets worse. Next, Jemmye gets a phone call and learns that her father is having unexpected health issues, so she also has to leave the game early. It is really, really sad when somebody needs to leave the game because something happened to them, like Tina breaking her hand. But it is even sadder when somebody has to leave because something happened to one of their loved ones. So I wish the best for Tina and Jemmye. I'm sad that they both had to leave this way. And I'm sad for the Treehouse Alliance because they're already down to 5 members without even one episode going by. After the unexpected departures, we see the authorities' deliberation. Janae uses her political prowess to team up with the Treehouse Alliance, and together, the 4 of them control the deliberation. They vote in Cyrus for the men per MJ's request, and for the women, they vote in Kendall per the Treehouse's request. But I don't think Janae really minded, considering Kendall totally screwed over MJ. Their vote makes Kendall's sabotage even more confusing. The entire cast seems to know that Treehouse exists, and they all also seem to know that Treehouse is targeting Kendall. Kendall sabotages MJ, someone not in Treehouse, because she wants to help the women, even though most of the women left are in Treehouse, who's targeting her. The most interesting thing to come out of the deliberation are Brad and Jordan's votes. They both come into it with the intention of getting yes voted into the arena, but then quickly realize they don't have the numbers to get anywhere near making that happen. So instead, they both burn their votes, seemingly on allies. Brad burns his on Ronnie and Wes, and Jordan burns his on Naya and Nehemiah. If Jordan did burn his votes on allies and is aligned with Wes, then it makes sense that he'd also be working with Wes's close friend, Nehemiah. Evidence number 2 that Wes and Jordan might be in a secret alliance. At the arena, Veronica and Kendall, then MJ and Cyrus, prepare to face off in Wait Up. Each player starts trapped inside their own cage with nothing but a bunch of sandbags and a hammer. Above them is a bin attached to one of the cage walls. Players toss sandbags into the bin until they weigh it down enough to lift the wall, revealing another wall with a boarded window in it underneath. Players then use their hammer to break open the window, using the hole they've created to escape the cage and ring a bell outside. First player to ring the bell wins. Because 3 women, 2 in this episode, have left the game without being eliminated, there is no women's arena. Veronica and Kendall are both off the hook. That just leaves MJ versus Cyrus, and their heat is determined largely by strategy. MJ recognizes the rhythm of the swinging bin and uses it to his advantage, only tossing sandbags when the bin is swinging toward him. Cyrus, on the other hand, despite being a D1 college basketball player, doesn't seem to get the swinging of the bin and instead just kind of throws them whenever, and they bonk off the side a lot and just fall to the ground outside the cage. I was actually wondering what would have happened if Cyrus ran out of sandbags, but fortunately it didn't come to that. MJ is the first to reveal his boarded window. He starts hammering little circles into it in the pattern of a larger circle, so that when he completes the circle, one big piece falls out and he can just jump right through and ring the bell. It looks really time-consuming. MJ is a roofer and a general contractor, so I thought maybe he had some kind of expertise in the area, like this is a known technique for breaking a wall quickly, but I don't have any expertise, and it looked really time-consuming. Eventually, Cyrus reveals his window too, but opts for a more classically challenge-esque, chaotic hammer smash. It seems to work a lot better than what MJ does. There's a point when it looks like Cyrus could burst through his window if he just kind of trusted his body to get it done. But instead, he keeps hammering away at it, which gives MJ enough time to catch up. His big circle piece falls out. He jumps through, rings the bell, and wins. Cyrus goes home. It's just like Cyrus's elimination in the ruins, when he was ahead in the elimination when it mattered most, but Kahada beat him at the last minute because he was more collected and had a better strategy. I'm really sad to see Cyrus go. If it weren't for him and his argument with James after a game of paintball, then my favorite challenge in franchise history, the one where they go to court, would have never happened. Cyrus gets a lot of love and respect from the cast as he makes his exit, despite most of them viewing him as easiest to beat. TJ is also very complimentary of Cyrus, so there goes my Rivals 4 fantasy cast. Now to read the rest of my notes from the episode, but only the good ones. The previously on the challenge segments are getting more and more elaborate. And I don't hate that.
There's something in the water on All Stars.
As for the next time on the challenge segment, we see a woman enter the game as a replacement for the 3 that have had to leave unexpectedly. I have no idea who it is. Some people I'd really like to see, none of whom I think will actually be there, are Emily Bailey, Ellen from Battle of the Sexes. I would love it if they brought Cynthia back, or I'm still not opposed to Tundra. We see the next challenge, which involves solving math equations on blocks from a high height. And we see the next arena, which Derek describes as the heavyweight matchup of All-Stars history. Then we see someone leave that arena in a stretcher. Thanks for watching. Come back next Tuesday for more Challenge All-Stars recaps. In the meantime, if you're so inclined, please like and subscribe. Bye!